So tax avoidance has been in the news again. First, the offshore Swiss accounts of UK residents. So what we're looking at here actually isn't avoidance, it's evasion, and we shouldn't really be shocked about it. We may be shocked about the extent to which these accounts were held, but the basic point is that you need to declare income, interest from everywhere if you're a UK resident domiciled individual. So the point of evasion is the real one. The message for your clients is that holding an offshore account of itself is not some kind of criminal act. You can hold an offshore account, of course, but if it generates any income, interest, then you need to declare it. And that's the main point. Second point here is that, of course, just anything that is offshore isn't inherently wrong. And that may be the message that people will have taken from the tone of the reporting on this offshore account scandal. So merely holding an offshore bond or an offshore fund isn't itself wrong. It has its own legislation. You can plan very tax effectively with offshore bonds and offshore funds legitimately because the legislation permits it. So the message to come from that report, I think, is one for you to give reassurance to your client that just because something is offshore doesn't mean it's wrong. Now the second reporting perhaps grabbed even more headlines because it was around the millibands, and it was to do with the deed of variation. They were, I think, wrongly portrayed as tax dodgers because they were merely using a tried and tested means of varying your will. Of course you don't vary it because you're dead, but after your death your family varies the will to change it to be in a form that is more acceptable to them. Now it generated some inheritance tax saving, but that was in effect a byproduct, even if it was the main reason for effecting the deed of variation. So what happened here is that the milliband's father died and everything was pretty much left to their mother. So they didn't use the nil rate band of the father. And this was before the time that we had the now available transferable nil rate band. So what they did is rewrote the will to make sure that a proportion of one property went to Ed and David, and that used up the nil rate band. Yes, there was an inheritance tax saving, but it was perfectly permissible. Many other people have done that. The legislation still exists, you could still do it today. Now the message for your clients is not anything to do with the milliband, it's just that deeds of variation are perfectly possible and perfectly legitimate, but the main message must be that probably best to not have the need for them by making sure that you keep your will up to date, making sure that it reflects where you want your assets to go, and making sure that you leave your assets in a way that is the most tax effective way possible within the legislation.